Last time we built a AI agent that remembers the context. Today we are going to make it more powerful. Right now our AI agent is smart but it's passive. What do I mean by that? Let's look at some example. I want to know how the weather will be in Paris on Monday. So I can send this request. It says, I am sorry, I cannot provide real-time data. So let's try another one. Let's say I want to fetch some details. Fetch details about my customer Neocorp. This customer data is in my system, in my database. Obviously AI will not know about this. Let's say what the AI says. Again, it says it doesn't have any specific customer known as Neocorp, which basically means it doesn't know how to fetch data from your database. It can only get responses from OpenAI. It cannot perform any other action like fetching data from database or making API calls to get some data, nothing like that. This is our current architecture. We have an AI agent which talks to OpenAI, and also we have Redis to store our memory or the context of our chats. Can we make our AI agent more smarter and be able to make database calls or make external API calls or any other functions? This is where the function calling comes in. We can make our AI agent call functions that can perform any actions like database queries, API calls, or any logic. Let's look at a demo of what is possible. Let's try this example. Fetch details about my customer. This time it is able to fetch some details like the address and the contact person of this customer called Neocorp. This is possible because I have integrated database calling in the backend. Let's look at another example of weather forecast. What will be the weather like in Paris on Monday? Now it returns the weather in Paris on Monday will be rainy with 12 degrees Celsius, and don't forget to carry an umbrella. All this data is coming from our function calling. Let's go ahead and implement this now. Let's start by defining few functions which can be integrated with OpenAI. Let's start by creating a service called weather service, which will have a single function called getWeather, which takes in a weather request as input and returns weather response as the output of this method, of this function. So let's create these two Pojo classes. I'll keep them inside a package called weather. Weather request. This will have a single field called location. There can be multiple. For now we'll start with single. The location is the parameter that AI will pass to fetch the weather. For example, Paris. And this is getters and setters and constructors. Similarly, we will create a response object. Weather response. The response will have three fields. What is the weather? This could be sunny, raining, so on. Then we have a temperature. Finally, we will have a advice that we can define. Bring umbrella. We will make annotations for this. Let's import this in our service. Okay, now this is where we will make the actual API call to fetch the weather from some other external APIs. For demo purpose, let us hard code some values for now. We'll return rainy, 10 degrees Celsius. Do not forget your umbrella. This is our advice that we will define. Let's mark this as service. Okay, this function is now ready. This can be integrated with our chat service. So before that, let's create another service called customer info service. Very similar. This is supposed to fetch data from database. This is our customer details. So we will create a method called fetch customer info. Customer info request is the input. And this would return customer info as the response of this function. Again, let's create the Pojo classes. Customer info request. Let's say for now we want to search customers by name. We will also create the customer info response class. This is the response that we might return after doing a database call, for example. Let's say I want to return the name of the customer, then address, then the contact person. So we annotate this with constructors and getters and setters. Finally, in the service, let's import these classes. Again, ideally, we should make database call here. For demo purpose, let's return some dummy response. Let's say New York Corp is our customer. Address is 123 4th Avenue, Springfield. Some location, and contact person is, let's say, Jennifer. So whenever the AI makes a function call to this function, this will return this hard-coded values for now. Let's mark this as service. Okay, so we have these two functions configured or defined. Let us now change the chat service to call these functions. In the chat service, let's define a list that holds all the functions that we will define. Let's call it chat functions. And we will define these functions in the constructor. We'll call a method called prepare functions that will prepare the functions. Let's create this method. So which would return the list of functions that we need for our agent. Prepare functions. So we have a list of functions. We'll start adding function definitions now. Functions.add. So the chat function has a builder pattern we can use. So build, and we'll pass, we start with the name is get weather. Then we have to describe it. Get the weather for a location. Then finally we need to give it a executor reference. This is the important part. Executor is weather. So executor takes two parameters. First one is what is the request parameter, what is the request type, then the method. So what method it's supposed to call. Let's say we need to call get weather inside weather service. Which takes in the request object. So we need to define this weather service in this class. Let's inject it. Let's inject it via constructor. So we have defined this function, and this returns the functions array back. So this is our weather function. Similarly, let's define the customer info function also. We are defining the list of functions, or we can call it a tools that we will associate with OpenAI. Let's add chat function. The name is get customer info. This can be anything. The AI should know what to call based on its name and description. OpenAI will decide what function to be called on what kind of user message. Get customer details by customer name. Finally, the important part is executor. So this takes a request of this type, and this request will be passed on to customer info service dot let's define this service here so that we know what is the method name. Inject it. Finally, we know we have to call fetch customer info and pass the request. We have now defined two functions from this method, and which is associated in this chat functions. Now when we are making a call to OpenAI, here when we pass the messages, we will also pass the functions to it. So the OpenAI knows what function it should call on what kind of user message. Along with the functions, we also need to configure function call, how the function call should work. This can also be controlled. There are different ways. For now, we'll just use a auto detect. So it will automatically detect what function it should call. That's all we need to do to define a functions, provide functions to OpenAI. In the OpenAI response, the response could be either a chat message that we have seen so far, or it could be a function call. So instead of directly getting the response into a string, we need to check whether it is a function call or is it a message. So appropriately we should take the next steps. So what we will do, we will assign this to a result object, and within the result we will have choices, chat completion choice, we'll get the first choice, then finally we'll get the response message, which is nothing but a chat message. Okay, so this message can contain content, the string content, or it could contain a function call. So before we can decide, we need to check whether there is a function call or not. If response message, let's zoom in this, dot get function call is not equals to null. In typical cases, it would be null when it's returning a normal string as output. Here we need to handle the function calls. Handle functions. If not, this means this is a normal AI response without any function call. So as usual, we can get the content. So to handle this function, we will create a method called handle function call, and we will pass the messages and the current response message. Let's create the handle function call method, which is responsible for handling the function call and returning the response. Handle function call, which takes the chat messages and the current response from the AI. Okay, handle function is basically two-step process. First is execute the function. Next, make OpenAI call with function response. The process is, let's say when a user makes a request, the request goes to OpenAI. OpenAI then responds with a function call. That means OpenAI is expecting some more information. Then we make a function call, we execute the function, then get that response and send it back to the OpenAI to make its decision. That is why this is two-step process. So let's start by the executing the function part. So before we execute a function, we need something called a function executor. So this is again a OpenAI's class. So the function executor is responsible to automatically detect which function should be called and invoke that function, and also convert the response to object, from object to string, make it a chat message which we can pass it back to OpenAI. So we define this executor and pass all the chat functions that are available. So now let us implement this. So we will call the function executor, execute. So it has many utility methods. The one we will use is this, execute and convert to message, also handle exceptions. This is what we will call, and we will pass the function call that we got. This returns a chat message. Function call message, or let's call it as function response message. So it's clear that our function is executed and its response is this message. This method will handle exceptions also, and it will convert our Pojo object into a string and return it into a JSON. So this message is something we need to return back again to OpenAI. So before that, we need to also add our current response that we got, assistant message back to this memory or the context. Then finally we'll add the function response message, response from the function call. So we are building this context or memory for the OpenAI. Now we will make another OpenAI call to get the final outcome of that request. This is pretty much similar. We're just calling it as follow-up request. So whenever there is function call, there will be multiple API calls to OpenAI. So we will make a call, OpenAI service dot create chat completion and follow-up request. This will return a result, chat completion result. We'll call it follow-up result. So this time we are assuming the follow-up result will be a string content and not another function call. It could be, technically it could be. So ideally this will be in a iterative kind of loop. Every function call, there can be multiple function calls you keep calling until there is some termination point. And get content. So finally we return this result. So just to recap what we are doing in the function handler. We are first executing the function, get that message, and add the assistant response message to the messages list, to the memory, and also the function call message. Let's say this is weather response saying in Paris it is 12 degrees and it's rainy. That is again passed back to OpenAI. And finally the result is captured and returned back to our main call. That completes our implementation. Let us now start testing out the scenarios. Let's start the server and start testing this out. Let's start by checking the weather in Paris. It is calling our function and returning 10 degrees Celsius. It also tells make sure to bring an umbrella with you. It doesn't matter if it's Paris or something, let's say London. Since our response is hard coded, it will probably return the same response irrespective of the parameters. Let us try the other scenario where fetching the customers. Who is my contact person for customer Neocorp? This is the corp that I hard coded. A dummy customer in our system. Your contact person is Jennifer Robinson. So it is making our call, function calls and getting this data. Let me start this in a debug mode and show you what is happening when the function call is happening. In the handle function call, I will put a breakpoint to see what this chat message that OpenAI returns is actually containing. Okay, I will try with the same user message. So it came to my breakpoint. This is the chat message that OpenAI returned. The role is assistant as expected. It is coming from AI. There is no content in this case because this is a function call. So function call object contains the name, get customer info, and the arguments as name as neocorp. So from our chat message, chat input message, OpenAI figured out it is supposed to call the method for the name neocorp. So let's try the weather use case. What is the weather like in Dubai? Again, the OpenAI made the function call. This time the function call name is get weather and there is parameter location Dubai. Is passing that name. So let's check a scenario where no need of any function call. Let's say list 7 wonders of the world. For this user message, there is no need of any function call. So AI should be smart enough to figure that out. See, it directly returned me the response. There was no call to any functions. There is no breakpoint that came to. So it decides when the function call should happen and what function should be called based on the user message.